Yeah, hello everyone. I hope you all are doing amazing today. So, as you already knew what is the topic for today's video and what we are going to cover, you have already read from the title or the thumbnail, like code obsession, the code smell. She is really my code is smelling. Yeah, exactly. You heard correct. Your code is smelling. Okay. So now today we are going to cover this primitive obsession, which is a code smell. Okay. So what is primitive obsession and what is code smell? So like primitive obsession is a code smell. Okay. So let me write here. Yeah. This is a code smell. Like where your primitives are your like int, string, and GUID are moreover used, like your int, string, like your primitives. If we talk about primitives, which could be like your string, int, or it could be GUID, are used in a domain specific designs. Okay, so like here, okay, let's see why is it a problem, like why there is a code, why there is a primitive obsession. Okay, the first is lack of type safety. Suppose you have one method here, I'm just giving a name as f, and it take two parameters, or there could be multiple, like one is your order id and the second is again a string which is your product id. Okay, and there could be multiple another parameters. So like there are high chances that you can mix the order of these variables, like instead of order id you just pass the product id, or vice versa, instead of product id you pass the order id. Okay, so it will not give you the compile time error. It will run, your code will be compiled successfully and it will be run. But the the implementation, like your business model, will get impacted, because this was the originally this was the your order id and this could be your product id. This should be your product id. Okay, but now you have changed the order and it will not give you any compile time error. Okay, so this is your lack of type safety. Okay, and second is duplication. Okay, so for duplication, suppose you have one method for create user. Okay, and here you are just taking the email, and just here you perform some validation logic. Okay, and then there is your business logic and you complete that. And there is another method which is suppose notify user, and here you have the string, again you have email, and what will be there here, again there is some validation. Okay, and there is some business logic. You can see here we have validation for the email, here again we have the validation for the email, but this is duplication. We are duplicating the code over and over. Okay, so one more thing, there might be a scenario that different developer might implement the different validation on different places. There could be a scenario that create user is developed by a developer A and your notify user could be developed by a developer B, and they both wrote the different validation logics. Okay, so for this was the second. And third is your reduced maintainability. It's harder to maintain your code because there is a different validation on the different places. You have to check individually and see like there are different validation on the different places. You have to go through and check all the places, like the all validations are in this synced or not, they all are same or not. Okay, so this was about your like why is it a problem. Okay, so next we have what is the solution. What is the solution of this? So for the solution of this, what you can do, you can create strongly typed, or we can say the value objects. these are mostly used in your domain driven designs. Okay, so for the value objects, like what will be the value objects? Like here you have the let's understand lack of type safety. Sorry, I'm not well. I am suffering from cold and fever and all. So yeah. So let's take an example of we had the f method where we were passing the string as order id, and then we have the another string for your product id. So now in the value objects you create the individual class for your order id and same for your product id, and these classes will contain all the business logic or the domain logic for your product id. Suppose you want to perform some validation, like your product id cannot be empty, and if there is a null in the product id you want to throw an exception. Okay, so you are not dependent on annotations and all. You have defined your complete logic or the validation for your product id and the order id in a single place in your domain. Okay, so let me show you the example I have in my computer, so I'll show you later. Okay, so what you can do, you can create a class your order id. Okay, and now here you can define like you were using string, you can define your string, or moreover we use GUID for that. So let me remove the string and we'll use GUID for this. Okay, so let me write GUID, and here we have the value, but I'll only get this. How I'll set this, I'll make one constructor over here, like I can create the private your order id. Okay, and this will take one GUID and it will take one value. Now here you can do the basic validation. If anything happens, you can just throw an exception here. Else what you can do, you can assign the value, and here you can create one another method, like for your factory pattern similar to, you can create one of method and you can do your validation if you want more validation, like for the null check, or if you have like an integer you wanna check for it shouldn't be the negative or nor be 0. So for all those validation you can mention here in the of method, and if all the checks pass, so if all the checks pass, then what you can do, you can here return new order id and the id which you are getting here. Okay, all the validations you can do here. Okay, so let me show you quickly the example we have in the computer screen. Okay, so this is the basic scenario which I told you, like I showed you in the iPad, that we have one email. Okay, so earlier what we were doing, inside each method we were defining our validation logic, and there could be a scenario like different developers might implement different approaches for the validation at different places. Okay, so there was no centralized validation. Okay, so what's going here, like here now what we have done, we have created one value object. Okay, so basically for the domains, here what we are doing, we are creating the domain specific value objects. We are encapsulating all the logic for your validation inside a single entity. Okay, so here we created one class for your email, and here we have the your email, and here we define one constructor, and what we are doing, we are checking, we are just performing the basic validation. If our email is not valid, throw an argument exception, your email is not valid, okay, or invalid email. So it is calling the isValid method here. So what we are doing, so inside isValid you can write your validation logic. Either your email contains @ or there might be a custom logic to validate your email. Okay, so there is the centralized logic for your email validation. Now you do not need to change into multiple places. Okay, now if you go to program.cs, you'll see we created this email, and here you do not need to perform any validation. It will be automatically handled by your value object. Okay, so like here, if I run this program, so let's see what output we can get. Oh, can you see we are getting invalid email format because we throw an exception in our this value object inside this constructor, like your email does not contain @. So let me again validate with the example @domain.com. Okay, so let me again rerun this and see if we get, oh yep, we have this user registered with the specific email and notification has been also sent. Like here you can write, here you can write your another logic you want to perform, not specific to your validation, because validation logic we have centralized into our value objects. Okay, so now you are not getting the smell from your code, but if you have your validation logic here, your code is smelling. And again, suppose if you have a entity, let me show you like where I actually implemented this, your whole value objects and all. I'm working on one microservice. So here you can see I have these all models and I have these all value objects. So let me show you with the, here, let me zoom a bit. So as you can see here, we have order ID, we have product ID. Okay, so if I write here your string order ID and string product ID, you can get what I'm trying to say. There's a lack of type safety. There are high chances and these variables can easily be mixed up. Okay, so for that sake I created these value objects for your order ID and for your product ID as well. And let me show you one more case, if I show you this address. Okay, suppose you have your customer here, okay, and here customer contains address attribute. Okay, so here if you are defining address like your string, your let me write here, you define public string address, okay, and then you are defining public string state, city, public string region. So you can see why we are defining these old strings here. There are high chances when we will create the constructor, these order can be changed easily and nobody can, and you will not get the compile time error for this. तो क्या करना है, हमें एक अलग से एंटिटी बनानी है एड्रेस की और उसके अंदर हमें सारी फील्ड्स को डिफाइन करना है. योर address, your city, your region, your postal code, and all those things. So same I done here. I created where is my address. So here I define all the things and inside the constructor, okay, I assigned these all things, and while creating this is the factory method that I was talking about. You are not directly instantiating the address. Here you are performing some validation, like you passed all the fields here, and you can perform more validation. I only applied on email address and address line. You can add more validations here, and after that you can good to go to create address. And another I used same here for the order ID and your product ID. Here order ID is not directly instantiating. I have wrote one factory method like of method here and we created this as a record because I do not want to change my order ID within my domain. Once the order ID has been instantiated or created, I do not want to change that order ID. So for that I used record. These are immutable. So here I define one private constructor for the order ID, and here I create of method from the factory pattern, and here I am doing some basic validation check, and after that I am returning instantiating my order ID, and this is I have used in my order item. For creating my order item, I here used my order item id dot of method. Okay, so this was like how you can go away from the smell of your code. Okay, so we have seen in the code like how we can use the strongly type IDs, or we can encapsulate the domain specific things into a single domain entity. Okay, so like what are the benefits of this approach? So first is type safety. Like you cannot like accidentally mix, like earlier we have the order ID as a string and the product ID. Now you cannot mix, you will get the compile time error for that. Okay, in your validation we have centralized all the validation inside a single entity. Now there is no validations on the different places. Okay, and domain clarity, it's make more sense. Like here written, it makes the domain model more expressive and easier to understand. Like by the look at that variable we can, okay, yeah, this is my product ID and this is my order ID. And for prevent the accidental change, we have defined as a record immutability. And for the consistency, because it ensure all the customer across the application configure the same validation. Yeah, we have configured the same validation rule for all the instances. Yeah, so for that's all for this video. If you find this video useful, do like this video and hit the subscribe button and press that bell notification for the latest updates. Thank you.